Frank Turek thinks he knows what atheism is, but he's proven time and time again that he's got no clue. Will this video prove otherwise? Let's find out. I got this older video from Frank Turek from a subscriber where Frank wants to tell us what atheism is, all the time having no idea what atheism is. Now that's certainly nothing new. Apologists pull that chestnut out all the time, but no matter how many times they're corrected on their misconceptions, the same old railroad job comes out because they don't care about the truth. Who would have known? Okay, it's off to the races with Frank Turek as he proves to us once again that his religious beliefs and understanding of the world around him are just delusional.
Ladies and gentlemen, do atheists merely lack a belief in God? I hear that a lot from atheists. For a number of reasons, no.
You know, it's funny how he thinks he gets to tell atheists what they actually think and believe, isn't it? But, of course, this is Frank Turek we're talking about here, and we know he has a serious problem with reality, integrity, intelligence. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But while atheists, by and large, are perfectly willing to let the religious hang themselves with what they actually believe, Frank isn't willing to extend the same courtesy. So let's see what Frank thinks atheism is, and how it differs from what atheism actually is.
Number one, if the word atheism merely means a lack of belief in God, then that really just says something about the atheist state of mind. It's not saying anything about the real world out there. It's not saying, well, the real world doesn't need a God. It's just saying, I psychologically don't have a belief in God. Well, that's not saying anything about whether or not God exists.
Actually, it is. Now, I can't generalize here. I can really only speak for myself, but this has been the case for the overwhelming majority of atheists I've ever spoken to, which leads me to believe that Frank has never, ever actually engaged in an intelligent conversation with an actual atheist. But for myself and many others, we understand that belief doesn't really matter in this case. It doesn't matter if I believe that God does or does not exist. It matters only if God actually does or does not exist. My beliefs are irrelevant, and whether Frank likes it or not, his beliefs are too. The only thing that we ought to be concerned with is the state of objective reality. That being said, I see no objectively defensible evidence that a God, any God, exists in the real world. Hence, I don't believe that one does. That doesn't mean that I believe they don't exist. I can't say that or know that for certain, but I don't have any reason to think that any gods are real, and lots of evidence, especially from within organized religion, to have significant doubts. But Frank doesn't understand that, does he?
Secondly, if atheists merely lack a belief in God, then this monitor is an atheist because it lacks a belief in God. This chair is an atheist. It lacks a belief in God. Outhouses lack a belief in God. Everything, even dogs and cats and roaches all lack a belief in God. You can see that word doesn't do us much, or doesn't do much for us if it merely means a lack of belief in God. It's not saying anything. Everything that exists lacks a belief in God if it isn't a living thing. How does that help us?
I guess dogs and cats aren't living things now, huh, Frank? As is no surprise, Frank doesn't actually think about what he says before he says it. But I will give him a little credit here because he's right. Atheism means nothing in and of itself any more than a leprechaunism or a unicornism does. Rejecting irrational claims for lack of evidence doesn't say anything about the real world in and of itself. It doesn't get us anywhere useful outside of acknowledging that these claims are faulty on their face. But here's what Frank and other apologists like him entirely miss. And I think it's on purpose because it's been pointed out to him plenty of times. Atheists aren't responding to gods. Those claims have already been rejected for lack of corroboratory evidence. We're responding to theists. We're responding to people who take these claims seriously for no good, credible reason. We are vocal only because there's a large group of people who are being irrational and making claims they simply cannot back up with anything resembling objective, defensible, or intellectually credible evidence. If all the theists just went poof tomorrow, and that would be a great thing, but if there were no more theists, then there would be no more vocal atheists because there would be no need. But so long as the irrational exist, so too must the rational to counterbalance them. When there were no flat earthers, there was no need for people to counter that idiotic belief. Same goes with anti-vaxxers. If no one fought against legitimate medical vaccination, there would be no need for anyone to stand up. Frank, the reason for atheists is you. Get a grip.
But thirdly, and maybe most importantly, atheism is not merely a lack of belief in God, because the atheists I know about, the atheists that I deal with in the book, Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case, are saying they have positive reasons to be atheists. In other words, they're saying that materialism is true, that everything is made of molecules and there is no immaterial realm, there is no supernatural realm. And they try and explain these things by evolution and multiple universes and quantum vacuums and these kind of things.
Sorry, Frank, but evolution and all that has nothing at all to do with atheism. It has to do with reality. Like it or not, there's a vast amount of evidence for evolution. It is the best supported theory in all of biology by far. It is undeniable by any kind of education and rational understanding of reality. It is irrational to reject evolution. You want to know why Frank and his kind do? Because they have a pre-existing irrational, unevidenced belief in something that cannot be even vaguely suggested to be so, but which provides emotional comfort, so they'd rather pretend what is unreal is real because it makes them feel good. Everything that Frank is pretending atheists are doing wrong, Frank is doing wrong. And he pretends that accepting science makes you an atheist, or that atheism makes you accept science, when the vast majority of Christians, for instance, reject creationism and accept the evidence for evolution while still maintaining their religious beliefs. So Frank is clueless, absolutely, demonstrably, incredibly clueless, and he's trying to pass off his own stupidity on others. Sorry, it doesn't work that way.
Well, those aren't just negative beliefs. They don't just lack a belief in evolution, multiple universes, or quantum vacuums. Those are positive beliefs that those things are adequate enough to explain reality as we know it. And those things are not adequate enough to explain reality as we know it.
Actually, they are. Because those things are, or at least potentially do, have evidence to support them. You reject them because they don't cater to your emotions. They don't make you feel good, and therefore you cling to something that does and reject all evidence to the contrary. Because to people like Frank, reality is all about them. It's not about dealing with reality as it demonstrably is. It's about demanding that reality has to cater to their comfort and appeal to them on a personal, emotional level. These people are egomaniacs. They are firmly convinced that their own personal feelings dictate the facts and not the other way around. And there's something really wrong with that.
So atheism merely being a lack of belief in God, I think, is a cop-out. And by the way, what word would you use if you don't use atheism for someone who says, I believe there is no God, or there is no God? What word would you use?
I don't know. Find me people who say that, because the overwhelming majority of atheists of which I am aware don't say that. But this is a straw man trotted out by dishonest apologists because they're desperate to cast atheism as the enemy to their beliefs. They do this because they want to convince the already faithful that they're right, not that their beliefs have some serious structural and rational issues. So they pretend that atheists hate their beliefs, making them the victims, and that atheists hate God, which makes them evil. The one thing they will never do is talk to actual atheists to find out what they really think. Mostly, that's because they don't care what they really think. They're just constructing imaginary boogeymen, just like Frank here is doing, because none of this is about the truth. It's all about the impression that he wants theists to have that they are persecuted and hated because of what they believe, instead of being pitied for being irrational and delusional.
I mean, somebody who just lacks a belief could be considered an agnostic.
Wrong. An agnostic in that sense is one who thinks it is not possible to know anything about the existence or characteristics of a God. It's one for whom the question isn't worth asking or considering. That does not describe the overwhelming majority of atheists.
So an atheist really is somebody who says there is no God.
In your own tiny mind, maybe. Too bad you don't know and don't care what actual atheists have to say.
If you want more on this, much more on this, get the new book, Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case, forward by the great Ravi Zacharias.
No thanks. Now, as I said, this is an older video that was sent to me by a viewer, but it perfectly shows Frank Turek to be the delusional, dishonest idiot that we've all come to know and detest. There is nothing here to be proud of, and as always, he's just preaching to the already delusional choir because no one else will listen to him. Every word coming out of his mouth is easily debunked, and his claims are laughable on their face, but it gets him paid, so he keeps catering to the clueless because they're the only ones dumb enough to pay attention. And I'm honestly not trying to be mean here, but come on. This is so blatantly ridiculous that anyone with half a clue and an honest bone in their body can tell just how absurd it is. Certainly, people have explained this to Frank many times over the years, and obviously, he's just ignored them because it falls outside of his emotionally comforting narrative and, let's be honest, his shills for a paycheck. Whether he actually believes this stuff or not, I don't know. I guess that's the difference between being just dishonest or being dishonest and stupid. Anyone with the knowledge, and Frank isn't a moron no matter what he believes, but anyone who ought to know better, yet refuses to know better, has some serious problems in his methodology, and this is nothing to be proud of. So, what do you think? Does Frank know better and is just lying for the Lord? Or is he really so utterly clueless that it doesn't matter what reality says, he's just going to believe in nonsensical things regardless? Let me know in the comments. And make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification, and tell others about the channel. If you're on social media, maybe mention a video or two while you're there. The more people who are part of the community, the more intelligent conversations we can have. And unlike Frank, I think that's a good thing. How about you?